This is in response to two segments of Lawrence O'Donnell's show on Thursday, March 26, 2015. One of them was from fitness instructor to ISIL terrorist fighter, and the other one is entitled How Kids Are Taught to Hate. And in the first one, it was in reference to someone by the name of Islam Yaken, who is now an ISIL fighter. And it has a picture of him squatting down, smiling, and it's a blotted out picture of someone who has been decapitated. And he talked about in his Facebook page how good it feels to decapitate or to murder the dogs, so to speak, the infidels, so to speak. Now, Lawrence was referring to an article in the New York Times by a photojournalist by the name of Mona El-Nagger, and I recommend that you read the article and watch the video on that. It took a while for me to watch it, so I finally just got to it now. And it had his journey, which was he was a big bodybuilder. They showed pictures of him. He really was fairly ripped. And they also interviewed and had a segment going across of interviewing some of his friends. One of them who was a photographer, and the photographer contacted him, I think via Facebook, indicating he wanted to take pictures of him because he thought they had a great physique, and they became friends after Islam Yaken found out that this guy was not gay, but he was a real guy. And they talked about women, and they talked about that other type of stuff. Islam Yaken also had some bragging about going out with women, sleeping with women, and he wanted to be a fitness instructor. He wanted to be able to travel the world. He wanted to have a hot girlfriend. And basically all he was able to do was to be a fitness instructor at some of the local gyms near him. He wasn't able to go to some of the posh gyms or some of the chic gyms in the area of Cairo, so to speak. Then a couple things happened that started him on his path to being a ISIL fighter. And one of them was that a friend of his died in a motorcycle accident, I believe it was around 2012. He was very upset about it. He took it much more harshly than other people, and that after a week or two or three, he was still lamenting his friend's passing, whereas other people had sort of forgotten about it. Even though it was painful to them, they were moving on with their lives. He was having a difficult time to moving on with his life. Islam Yaken then began his journey, so to speak. This also was coinciding with the time that Hosni Mubarak was being overthrown. Then the Muslim Brotherhood came in election, then they were overthrown, and that some of the things that he might have thought might have been available to him with the Muslim Brotherhood, who was very, very strict Islamic, felt that he was missing out on some things because of this, but he was beginning his journey at that particular point in time, and some of the things that had gone on was the fact that he was not much of a Muslim before that. He didn't pray very much. His father encouraged him to pray quite a bit, but he didn't want to do it. He found, what he was doing was he was lifting a lot of weights, he was checking out women, and he was doing a lot of social media. He had a lot of friends, and over a period of time, after this friend had died, and after Hosni Mubarak had been dethroned, and after the Muslim Brotherhood had been dethroned, he started going to temple the mosque more often. He started talking to I don't know, it was an imam, can't remember, a preacher there, so to speak. He started reading the Quran, he started studying it, he started memorizing it. He was looking for answers in his day-to-day life in it, because obviously the bodybuilding had not done it for him. He was also slowly but surely becoming more and more conservative. At one point in time, he dropped all the women from his Facebook friends. He had guilt about, and this is one thing that Lawrence and Mona went into a little bit in depth, was the fact that at a certain point in time that he had a lot of guilt about, I think that even was referring to that sinning led to guilt with him, especially about women. And what Mona and Lawrence talked about, which is very, very fascinating, is that he was seeing a local person in a mosque who was trying to lead him on the way, to lead more prayer, reflection, etc. And then at a certain point in time, he was watching a very, very popular but an extremely conservative religious leader who showed a segment where he talked about that if you both went to university, a man and a woman, and the man liked the woman, but she was completely veiled, so he really couldn't see her, and that he never talked to her, he never looked at her, he just fantasized about her, whatever, then of course that was a sin. And I could bring that back to my Christian thing. I can go back to Jimmy Carter about that being a sin. And the thing is that with the Christian, my being Catholic, recovering Catholic, is that there is that concept, and it is reinforced, especially when I was very, very young, about that need to be pure, not just in a sexual way, but in all ways. That sinning, and obviously with Islam Yaken, that he took this much graver to heart. He sought out the more conservative ones. And one of the things that I have found out about a number of people who I've known in my life who have turned to become more Christian is that they turn to become more Christian, they become exceptionally more conservative, and because they have their religion as their background, it allows them to dismiss a lot of things. Because their Christian religion, at least for the people that I've known, allows them to dismiss these things. So the example would be that you can dismiss your family because they're not Christian like you. You can dismiss your wife, let's just say, or husband, because they're not as Christian as you. Or even those that are even very, very staunch in their religion can dismiss their children because they're not as Christian as you. And it also gives you the opportunity, or gives someone the opportunity, that they can give up on someone. They might give up on their children because they're not doing what's biblically said to them. So I can relate that back to Islam Yaken in the sense that, yes, that once a person gets that religion and is going to be to the conservative side, or I would like to say the dark side of that end of the religion, it allows them to dismiss anything that they had learned before, anything whatsoever that they had learned before. So here's Islam Yaken, fitness instructor, can make it up to the big time, starts a lot of introspection, loses a friend in a motorcycle accident, Hosni Mubarak gets kicked out, Christian Muslim Brotherhood comes in, they get kicked out. So at the same time, there's a lack of economic opportunity in Egypt because Mubarak had his buddies. The very, very difficult situation because people got where they got because of connections. There was also a lot of political alienation. And this Islam Yaken was always torn about what was going on. And of course, then at some point in time, he landed over on the dark side. He went blindly to the dark side. He used his religion as a crutch, which allowed him to kill other people, allowed him to do all that types of things. And I strongly recommend that you watch that. I just wanted to bring in the Dale Hansen aspect of it later on, where Dale Hansen, the next segment of Lawrence O'Donnell, talked about how some kids at a basketball game, it was mostly a white high school against a black high school, they had a couple signs that went up, and even though there was like 10 signs that they could have put up, they put up 2 signs together which said white power. And Dale Hansen, who was a political guy in the Dallas area for about 30 years or so, basically said kids are taught to hate. And I can relate that to the earlier one. So we have Christian kids, I'm assuming Christian kids, Texas. They're taught to hate, even though Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, almost 60 years passed. Civil Rights Act, Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. Civil Rights Act in 1964. We still have that hate. And, the parents were excusing that in terms of the basketball game. The kids just happened to be standing next to each other. No. That was designed. That was planned. And kids are taught to hate. And I remember when I was growing up as a young man, and even before I was 10 years old, that in my house, if I had ever used the N-word, I would have gotten the shit kicked out of me royally. But, there were a number of other households that I would go frequent at times, whereas the father of the house would use the N-word quite frequently. And it didn't bother him that the sons were using that word also. And the reason why I wanted to bring those two up is that, we can use our religions for hate. or we can use our religions for love and for peace and for acceptance and for goodwill and for honesty and for forgiveness and for compassion. And I'm not saying that we're not. That's what the first segment of Lawrence was about in terms of Islam Yaken, who went to the dark side, and then the other one from Dale Hanson's retribution, or jumping on those high school kids for continuing to hate. We need to stop the hate.